Infiltrator No Manor, which Meg and I love and adore.
At this point in time, the war is going very badly for them.
She fights a mental lightsaber battle with her alter ego.
Oh, she's gone through so much, but seeing her like persevere and come through it.
I challenge any modern Star Wars fan to say that the expanded universe didn't have powerful female role models. Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. Meg and I are here to discuss our new Jedi Order series. We are on book 17. This podcast is for all die-hard Star Wars fans who are very familiar with the expanded universe, and also for newcomers if you're curious, if you're interested to check out the older original Star Wars expanded universe of books. Now, what is this? This event takes place between 21 to 25 years after the original movie, where Luke Skywalker is restoring the new Jedi Order, and it's across 19 adult books written by several different authors. Meg, you and I have covered previous 16 books. It's been pretty epic, but we made a pause, to say, for half a year. We've been away. Tell us how things are on your end. How's your channel going? What's new with you?
Yeah, things are good. I'm continuing my lengthy Legends reread, and this year is sort of a grab bag. It's like all the Clone Wars books that came out because of the TV show, Republic Commando. I just read the first Darth Bane book for the first time ever, which I was surprised. I just never read him before.
Yeah.
So that's fun, just trucking along.
Yeah, I remember when those books were first announced, and I was super excited. The Duke Carpussian of the writer of the Knights of the Old Republic video games was attached to the project. So everybody was looking forward to it, and I didn't know how exactly that particular skill set of an author would convert from a video game, right, from a digital media into novel. But I would be curious to check it out what your thoughts are. Guys, check out Meg's channel. She does some awesome book reviews. Obviously, all the relevant links will be dropped in the video description below. She does some amazing, amazing reviews. And I'm curious myself what you're going to think of it. And by the time you finish the trilogy, maybe they'll be the topic of our potential podcast or something. It'll be cool to discuss.
Yeah.
Any latest shows you've been checking out, particularly Star Wars? How is the modern Star Wars been treating you? Are you eating good? Like, what are your favorite shows?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I really liked Andor, and Andor set a bar for me that it's really hard for any of the other shows to measure up to.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. It is coming out on like Blu-ray and 4K, I think at the end of April, and I'm like, buying it, but I want to keep it. Yeah, I like never finished Bad Batch, and then found out a spoiler about Bad Batch through an Instagram reel of someone in cosplay, and I was like, oh, did that happen? One of my friends was like, yeah, that happened. I was like, okay, I should probably catch back up, because I feel like Ahsoka season 1 was a lot of setup. Like a whole season of setup, and I don't know, I was like, after riding that Andor high, and it was like nothing else was giving that feeling to me.
I'm sort of in the same boat. For me, Ahsoka was finally the one that broke the camel's back. I discontinued my Disney channel. Like, I said to myself, if you're not enjoying something, there's no point of going out there and announcing your feelings to the world, how you dislike something. Like, okay, let's move on. Let me take a quick break. Maybe I oversaturated myself with Star Wars. This is definitely not hating it for me. Like yourself, I was a huge fan of the Andor show, and I did catch the first 2 episodes of the Bad Batch, which is consistently good for me. I'm happy to say that I've been overall enjoying all 3 seasons, but I just need to catch up with that as well. Guys, let's do a quick recap, since it's been quite a while, and we had been a tradition of doing that before we launch the actual podcast on this book. Let's recap and see what's been going on before. I'll give you guys a brief description, and then we can finally jump into the discussion here. So we left off reading The Force Heretic, Remnant, and Refuge. All 3 books are written by the same authors, Sean Williams and Shane Dix. Those came out in July of 2003, and the events over there are taking place 28 to 29 years after the original Star Wars movie. Now, what's been going on there? The New Alliance, Provisional Governor, plus the Imperial Remnant redoubled their forces on counteroffensive. Han, Leia, Jaina, and their friends held Bakura from the Shiruvan invasion, which we found out through a plot twist was actually a Vong infiltration influencing that culture. And the Prime Minister, Counterdol, who is a human replica, is defeated. Again, you and I covered how many subplots and subtwists there and surprises upon surprises. Yeah. Now, while researching for the Xenoma Sequot, the key of winning this war, Jason helps his team with a new lead. What if it's a moon? What if we've been searching in the wrong place all this time, trying to identify of a planet, and it's a completely different celestial body? Mm-hmm. Han Leia helped Tahiri Vela confront her emotions, the loss of Anakin, their son, who was obviously her lover, and her Yuzong Vong repressed alter ego was revealed in the previous book. Infiltrator Nomenor, which Meg and I love and adore, we're forever fans of this guy. His latest scheme to spy on Supreme Overlord Shimra with his newfound ally, a priestess of the Yunhar La. And both of them don't believe in the Yuzong Vong prophecy anymore, and they're trying to upset the balance. Now, the book ends with the Jedi next destination being planet of Onadax in the Minos Cluster to reestablish a contact with the new alliance. Now, let's dive into this podcast. We're discussing book number 17, The Force Heretic Reunion. And it's been a very contested book in terms of like fan reaction back in the day, but also today. One of my friends as well, one of the moderators on our Facebook group, he just finished this trilogy as well, and he had quite a lot to say about this. It will be interesting to see how our personal opinions diverge from his. The events in this book also cover from 28 to 29 years after the original movie. Let's start kicking off with what's going on there, and along the way, Meg will kind of add on and speak up her feelings. And you're a lot fresher, right, on reading these books. I haven't read them since back in the day, since they originally came out. So my memory is a little bit hazy. And Meg, I'm pretty sure you will step in and give us a more kind of like unwrap the story and the characters, give us a fuller overview of what's going on here. So let's get going here. Nomenor, the self-appointed prophet of the Shamed Ones, his new Jedi worship heresy is a threat to his people. And he actually plays into it and seeds further discord among his rivals. He reports lies, wants to spy on his overlord, and reports lie to Shimra with help of his new cohort, Priestess Nan-Lu. Shunmi Esh is her name. If I'm pronouncing it correctly, guys, please correct us. But she's one of his trusted allies, and she's also a true believer, and she sees through his personal manipulation that he aims to splinter with another heresy to overthrow their supreme leader. And he and his band of heretics are killed in a confrontation with Nomenor. Now, this is a separate character, not to be mistaken with this priestess. He is also one of the shamed ones, a soldier who is like a true believer, believes in this cause. Again, Shunmi Esh, I think his name. But Meg, we often talk about how Yuzong Vong politics are rampant in this new Jedi Order series. And Nomenor is the ever-shifting unknown variable in the new Jedi Order plot. Now, my question is, how do you suppose the Vong have their structure has society has lasted all this long, and their well-oiled war machine survived all this time with rogue elements like Nomenor in it?
Well, I feel like them having to make that long journey from their galaxy to the galaxy far, far away was, number one, it's sort of like left them in a state of stasis where like nothing changes, nothing grows, nothing develops. But then also like they have a common goal to work through, like, hey, we got to get here. Yeah. And I think that reality of like finally ending up in the Star Wars galaxy, and at this point in time, the war is going very badly for them, sort of brings all those elements like the shamed ones who are very not happy with their place in society. People like Nomenor who don't believe in the Yuzong Vong religion at all. It's like tensions may have been there like for years and years and years, but this is like the boiling point that causes them to erupt over. And I think that, like, the Jedi heresy is very interesting because Nominor does not believe in it at all, but sees it as a means to an end. But like the shamed ones legitimately
Yeah.
believe this because it's an opportunity for them to, move out of this horrible position in society that they've been given.
Yeah. I think you and I were both touched on the fact that one of the most extraordinary things about the new Jedi Order series is how well the Yuuzhan Vong culture is fleshed out. And the authors they don't give it to you right away and everything, so you completely know where we stand with this culture and why they're invading. It's slowly secrets and elements of their society has been revealed over the books and you gradually build this picture of what they are. And that's what I think would help to build that surmounting tension and make a audience more interested. And at this point, I felt like guys like Nominor and what they're doing, subverting their own culture, it basically shows how once a proud, powerful empire is rotting at the core, and it's not even seeing it. It's not identifying its all cancerous parts and trying to isolate them. And Nominor is representative of that. And it's completely justified why he would act in his own self-interest against his own people. It's almost like, hey, look, it's a sinking ship and the rats are going to be escaping it and everybody is up for themselves. And Nominor, because of his personality and because of his career path, so to speak, right? He's a spy. He's a prime candidate to do that, to tip that scale. The next question I had for you is talking about the Yuuzhan Vong religious zeal. Do you feel that it drove the Vong military success, or is it the root of the Empire's inevitable doom?
I think it contributes to their doom because they're so stuck in their ways, and it's only a few people like Nen Yim who are able to see beyond these blinders that they have on. That I think their military strategy is flawed. I mean, it's basically they are running on overwhelming force and nothing else, and so many of their strategists are bad. They're bad at what they do. And I don't think it helps that you have the priests cheering them on, yeah, go, go, go. And you're like,
once the novelty of confronting these biological ships, which is entirely different technology from what this galaxy has confronted before, once the novelty of that and the Vong tactics wears off, then systemically the New Alliance and later on the Imperial Remnant who joined them, they start identifying the weak spots and targeting them. And I agree with you here. On one hand, religious zeal, if we look across, our culture, our history, has produced some of the biggest ravaging wars which are as terrible as they are. You can't acknowledge they were effective because the people are, the soldiers, the military, spurred on by this maniacal belief that we are in the right here, right? With the Nazi Germany, headed by this zealot, by this psychopath, the citizenry was convinced or coerced to believe that we are in the right here. We are the superior race. It's almost like religious, cult-like behavior. Then they were very effective. They were able to cross across the Soviet Union's territory and reach Moscow in 4 meager months, which nobody anticipated. So on one hand, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's something that was very effective, but once you start slacking, and once you lose grip on your vassals, so to speak, right? If we take the Supreme Leader Shimra, once you lose grasp of what's going on in your empire, and you can't trust your own ministers anymore, that's it. That same religious zeal that helped you be this effective war machine, it's going to be your downfall.
Yeah, it's almost like when things start to go wrong, the Vaughns start to turn against each other, which is counterintuitive because you can't win if you're at odds with each other.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting take we see in this particular book, how the weaponization of faith turns back on its own people. Yeah. Moving on in this story, Han, Leia received new intel on a planet Onodox. We mentioned in the previous podcast that was the planet of destination where more potential clues would be found. That the Yuuzhan Vong are attacking outer rim planets to deny Mon Calamari forces contact with the unknown regions of space, they arrive to the next target, planet Esphanadia, with their daughter Jaina, Jagged Fel, and a full force of a galactic alliance backed up by the Imperial Remnant Fleet, who join their forces. Leia Han and his friend Droma go down to the planet searching for the long-range communication base. They accidentally kill a few natives, cold ones, the planet's ectoplasmic native species, but C-3PO's trusted 6 million forms of communication come in handy here, and he prevented further damage and established trust with the species by saving them from the Vong orbital bombardment. Friends lead them to the base. The team discovers Vong Villip and believe there is a traitor in their midst. Now, the cold ones, Maggie, are very different from what we've seen in the Star Wars galaxy before.
Yeah.
What do you look for and enjoy in terms of new exotic planets and the new alien species in Star Wars books?
Yeah, well, obviously there's the ones that are recognizable. Like you go, oh, okay, it's like a person, but this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you've got ones like the cold ones where you're like, oh, you are, which like makes sense to me, that alien species, if you have worlds where the atmosphere is not oxygen, like different kind of life forms are going to evolve. And I think like it's interesting there because they don't even think of them as like at first, oh, these are sentient, like we need to protect these. And then once they realize, it's like, oh gosh, we stop what we're doing.
For me, it was an episode of Star Trek where, even older Star Trek, which original series is my favorite one, for practical reasons, when you're filming a story, you're kind of going to go with what's practical and just put on a mask or some kind of like costume, customize your crew, and that's who's going to perform. Later on, obviously, when CGI effects stepped up to the level, I mean, when the prequels came on the scene, it were unprecedented level of hand animated characters on screen, performing, emoting. They have full story arcs. This was not done until Phantom Menace came out, right? We saw Jar Jar Binks, we saw all these other characters. And I sort of got too used to bipedal humanoid aliens, and it started wearing down on me. With Star Trek, with Star Wars, I'm like, can we come up with something different? At least 6 arms, like the Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoomian Chronicles on Mars, the John Carter of Mars. He starts introducing these 6 armed apes or something like that. So he's going out of that known and familiar territory where all of your aliens are just basically bipeds with like spiked heads or something. So for me, it was really interesting that there's different sentient life forms represented in a way that is different. But I'm glad that the story didn't fixate on them too much, because at the end of the day, you need some sort of anthropomorphic entity to empathize with. I mean, ectoplasmic goo running around. It's like, oh, okay, just kind of pat it on the head. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to do that. It works for a particular plot element, but no more than that.
But like, they're not going to be. It's like just having read the Darth Bane book, and they appeared at the very end when they're on the planet with the bouncers that appear in like the Dark Jedi books, and they're like round, green, furry, floating globes, and I'm like, that's cool, but also, I would not make them like a protagonist character or anything.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, all like storytellers say that we need to be able to see ourselves in the story that we follow to empathize. And I don't mean in terms of the appearance. I don't mean like, oh, this person looks like me. No. It's a being, an entity, a character that is going through the same kind of motions that you could experience and you could feel. And you could say, oh, man, I've been in a situation like this. So they need to be anthropomorphic in a way.
Yeah.
Moving on. This was probably, for me, one of the more interesting things to reminisce on and write questions about. I'm very excited about this particular point. Tahiri Vela. She's
Yeah.
still in deep emotional turmoil. She fights a mental lightsaber battle with her alter ego while in a state of coma. Rena Quad is slowly chipping away at the Jedi sanity. She feels guilty moving on with her life after Anakin's death. Jaina Solo joins her friend in a Force mind meld and gives Tahiri the much-needed strength to defeat her tormentor. She comes out of the coma with a new combined personality as a Jedi she was and the toughness and loyalty of the Yuzong Vong. Now, we went through a Tahiri's harrowing experience, right? Losing her first love, mental torture and mutilation, called to action in a devastating war from intergalactic invaders, something no young person should experience. What makes her such a compelling character?
I think for me, it's that Tahiri has gone through so much. Like, what even before the new Jedi Order, her backstory in the Junior Jedi Knights books, which was that like her parents were killed and she was raised by Tusken Raiders and then comes to the Jedi Academy and then being captured and tortured by the Yuzin Vong, losing Anakin on this like desperate mission where they don't think they're going to make it out alive. You're like, oh, she's gone through so much, but seeing her like persevere and come through it is so inspiring. Like you can go through terrible experiences and still like come out okay from it. I mean, Tahiri has a lot of trauma she has to work through, but I think that seeing her be able to take in that part of herself that she didn't want. She didn't want this Yuzin Vong personality, but she's able to like integrate it into herself for the better is like really, really inspiring.
Yeah. And I was particularly interested that the writers specifically chose a female character for this particular scene because the contrast between her being a girl and going through this very emotionally terrible experience, which makes her even stronger at the end. It shows the type of strength which it's unfortunately hardly ever seen in, general Hollywood blockbuster movies, where if you put, pardon my language, a tough chick in a movie, she's got to be this badass flexing her muscles. I can kill everybody. I can be as tough as the lead male guy and rub it in his face. See, I can do this too. Because with men and women, this is not necessarily what strength is all about. It's that mental and spiritual fortitude. I even had dropped a few notes that I was writing it because I was kind of like musing over these ideas and thinking what makes her particularly interesting to me personally. And, it's the fact that she's this flawed character who confronts and overcomes tough life experiences, resonates with readers.
Yeah.
Spaceships, lightsabers, that's all a veneer as far as I'm concerned. Star Wars is about powerful stories. It's about higher ideals and role models that everyone can incorporate in their lives and aspire to be. It's in light of what, this social divide that we have today and the younger generation, the way that they look at the storytelling and heroes. I personally don't want to see characters who are flawless, who don't have a chip on their shoulders. Like, I can do what anyone else can do, and we're just one huge happy family, and you can be anything you want to be. No, I'm sorry, you can't. You need fortitude, you need discipline, you need to be, unfortunately, traumatized, and you can't be a victim, somebody who's oppressed and who's been done wrong, and somehow the reality will resolve itself to align with your philosophy. That's not how reality works. And this fictional book reflects that very well. And that's why I think that Tahiri is such a compelling and interesting character that any teenager, any young person, any adult who reads this book can say, holy crap, she went through all of this tough stuff and she still came through and she came on top. And she didn't throw away either part, the Yuzong Vong part, which she saw the good in it. That loyalty to her own people and camaraderie. She took some of that and she saw her own little weakness and flaws of a Jedi, which I'm so happy to see that the new Jedi Order, the way it talks about Jedi, they're not flawless, immaculate Jesus Christ figures. They're people just like you and I who
Yeah.
dedicated their lives to this lifestyle that tries to serve others. Sort of like laser space samurai in a way.
Mm.
So that's why I thought she was really, really interesting. The next question I have also in regards to her is, one second, let me find my notes. Oh, that's another one that I wanted to make a comparison here. How is her personal journey different from another female Jedi that we also have in the series, Jaina Solo, who also goes through a lot of things?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for Jaina, I think a lot of hers is one, she has, as we see in Balance Point, a lot of feelings about her family,
Mm-hmm.
understandably so when you've read the Bantamera books and you're like, they don't get to spend a lot of times with their parents. How many times
Yeah.
were they kidnapped? And then, they go off to Jedi Academy training, which is fun, but again, you're like away from your family. So Jaina like has to come to terms with especially her feelings about her mom. And then she loses both of her brothers. She gets one of them back, but one of them is gone forever. And the one
Yeah.
she gets back is changed. Having a prophecy where she's told that, like, she will be the sword of the Jedi and she
Yeah.
will be forever alone. So it's like having to come to terms with her feelings about her family, having to come to terms with this prophecy, having to come to terms with the fact that she doesn't want to lose people around her. And like, how do you balance that? How do you be close, but also know that like you can lose them at any moment? Because she struggles with that. She pulls back too much at times.
Mm-hmm.
She's like too involved at times. And I really like too that she's like a key part of Tahiri coming to terms with herself. Like she needs Jaina's strength to she needs to know that like the solos are there for her.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not understand what she's going through, but they still support her regardless.
Yeah, in a way, she is the Solo family adopted daughter. She's
Yeah.
somebody that they truly embrace, and Han and Leia, they're trying to help her through. But I found it's very interesting how Jaina's journey to figuring out who she needs to be and maturing and developing versus Tahiri are quite different. Where I always felt that Tahiri, both of them are in tune with their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them are able fighters when it comes to like practicality with the battlefield. But I always found that Tahiri is more of a kind of philosopher warrior. She's
Yeah.
less about lightsabers and she's more about fighting this war emotionally and showing others by example that I can overcome my loss. We all can heal from this devastating war. Right? She shows that I loved this boy so much, but I'm still gonna overcome. I'm not gonna let this war and the Yuzong Vong make me this broken shell of myself. I'm gonna overcome. Where Jaina, once again, she's also, like you mentioned earlier, she also goes through like this emotional roller coaster of things, and she needs to compartmentalize and sort things out to restore her house, put it all in order. But I always felt that she, whether it's through implication of the prophecy that she kind of like has to assume it, or whether it's through her temperament. But Jaina is the warrior type. No matter how much she thinks about things, at the end of the day, she needs to step in the front line. She needs to slash the enemy in front of her, and that's how she defeats her doubt. That's how she overcomes herself. She needs to be in the front line. She's the tough chick in the full sense of the word. And that's what, to me personally, what's appealing about her, because she's quite different from Tahiri. And both of them together add a very colorful cast of characters who you can all draw from. A certain type of temperament person say, ooh, I'm more like Tahiri. I feel like, I had all this emotional burden in my life, but I overcame. Another person, maybe I would assume somebody who's perhaps like an athletic person. Or, I was in a college basketball team, and I remember this particular game that we had to win. And I was there in the front, on the defense line or attacker line or whatever. And I was there. I stepped in and I delivered, and our team won. Completely different personalities.
Yeah,
Good.
one of the things I love about Jada is how she combines traits from both of her parents. And I feel like And that's one thing she has to learn. She has a lot of Han's impulsiveness, and especially in the beginning of the New Jedi Order, she will throw herself into situations before she thinks about it first. But I think especially as she grows and develops, you see a lot of Leia in her, in that like, I gotta take charge here. I've gotta be the one that decides what we do. And I'm like, go girl.
Yeah, taking full reign of your life and assuming responsibility for things. That's
Yeah.
what maturing is all about. It's like, to be honest with you, not to sound negative, guys, I'm so tired of characters who arrive to the scene with all their bells and whistles like intact, like, yeah, I'm here to save the day, boy. Like, you know what? I don't really care. What makes you interesting? You know, what things did you have to go through and grow in the process? Because that's what life is, right? Our entire lives work in the process. You know,
Yeah.
to fine tuning yourself, your professional career, your intimate relationships, your friendships, and so forth. You constantly have to work on yourself and discipline yourself to get the most out of life. And that leads up to my last question on Tahiri. Knowing us Star Wars fans, you, myself, everyone included, symbolism, meaning, George Lucas meant this, or James Luceno implied that. Or we all look for symbolism in our books. Now, in regards to Tahiri's mental transformation and assuming these two roles, combining them into one new personality, is there symbolism in this newfound identity?
I think so, because it's almost like Tahiri fighting with Rena, to me, felt a lot like, fighting your dark self,
Right.
like that mythological thing. And the way that, she doesn't have to kill her dark self, she has to incorporate it.
Mhm.
And so it's like, yeah, that's not evil. That's just, there are some aspects I want to use, there's some that's not. And I don't know, it felt so like mythos to me.
Mhm.
Like you would almost be expecting, oh, she's gonna, in her mind battle, she kills Rena and that's it. And then being like, no, I'm Tahiri, but I'm also Rena. And you're like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it's not the case of split personality disorder or saying that I can be anything I want at any given time. No, there's a whole idea. It's actually the duality of a single nature. And in a way, it's almost, a lot of these self-reflective books, psychologists, they talk about self-forgiveness. And her inner dark side, her wrong aspect of her, it's not really talking about literal new personality type. It's talking about seeing what happened in the past, seeing the loss of your loved one, all that anguish, anger, and and this impulse to retaliate on your enemy. She comes to terms with that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very interesting way where you can take science fiction and create this fictional situation, which obviously doesn't happen in real life. Your sleeper agent, suppressed identity. Now there's two people living inside of it. It's all very familiar throughout science fiction. But I really like it how they brought it home in this particular case and made it very relevant to real life, and not in a preachy way at all. This book is not doing, see, kids, if you want to be strong in life, you have to be this particular way. It never preaches. It hands you something that you perhaps experienced before in your own life, and you could identify there. All of us carry a dark shadow deep within, and it's okay. That's what makes a good person. In order to know what good is, you have to find out what evil is, right? That's what Yoda teaches Luke on Dagobah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Moving on with the story here. Luke Skywalker, Mara, Jason, and their friends finally discover Xenoma Sequad. The Yuuzhan Vong battle forces is defeated by the native forces. The friends arrive on the planet's surface and are reintroduced to the blue-skinned natives called Ferrons, who worship their planet and they don't like outsiders. Now, Jason figures out that his grandfather and his grandfather, Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, visited the planet long ago before Grand Moff Tarkin tried to invade it. Luke and his team meet the planet's magister, Jabitha Hall, who was his father's ally. He knew Anakin Skywalker. They discuss a potential alliance and joining forces to defeat the Yuzong Vong. Now, the Expanded Universe project is a vast canonical storytelling over different media. And this particular scene connects the original trilogy hero Luke Skywalker with his father Anakin and his exploits with Master Obi-Wan Kenobi that we see in the previous Expanded Universe novel, Rogue Planet, which was written by Greg Bear and was released in May of 2002. Now, do you think the authors did a good job of connecting the dots here?
I think so. Well, I feel like if you've read Rogue Planet, by the time you get to Reunion, you're like, oh yeah. But I feel like, and it's hard for me to judge because when I read Reunion, I had read Rogue Planet, so I'm like, yeah, here we go, back on the planet. There's Jabitha, there's all the way that like the consciousness of the planet takes different forms to communicate with people, and one of them is like Padawan Anakin. I don't know if I can judge, but I feel like if you hadn't read Rogue Planet, I think there is enough explained that you'd still know what's going on, but it definitely helps to have read that one as well.
In your mind, was this a simple effort to adhere to a strict canon, which Expanded Universe obviously was, or was it an organic way to tap into 30 plus years of rich Expanded Universe narrative?
Well, it's interesting because when Rogue Planet came out, I believe it was the first prequel era book that came out after the Phantom Menace novelization. So a lot of people read it and were just like, Anakin and Obi-Wan adventure. But there definitely are tie-ins in it to the new Jedi Order because Zonama Seacoat is like running away because the planet's been attacked by the far outsiders. And like, if you read between the lines and you were reading the early new Jedi Order books, you'd be like, ooh, I think I know who those are. So I think it was intentional. Like when they were doing Rogue Planet, they were like, hey, we've got this, post Return of the Jedi story going on. You want to have some allusions in there. But then I didn't really think I was going to see anything further of it. So I really appreciate not just how they bring it back in Reunion, but like how pivotal it is.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really enjoyed the fact that it was an added bonus and a nod to people that have stayed with the Expanded Universe for a long period of time. I feel like in modern Star Wars, adhering to strict canon kind of like puts a lot of authors in a corner, and they almost feel like they have to just check mark that off. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to connect to something else. It's just in certain ways, and not to criticize a lot. I enjoy a vast majority of modern Star Wars books. I think they're brilliant stuff out there. But on that behalf, I was thinking about this yesterday before, kind of like preparing for this podcast, that unfortunately, we can never recreate the conditions of how the Expanded Universe was originally written. I mean, it was a true sandbox in the full sense of the word, where these early authors, some of whom I had the privilege of interviewing, they were basically, the only reference they had were the West End games with the tabletop RPG games. They were kind of setting up their own lore for, tabletop fans, which really didn't have this one umbrella of storytelling. It wasn't born yet. And all these authors had to basically start it from scratch with approval from George Lucas. He said, okay, I veto that. I don't think this particular character will work, this and that. He kind of like oversaw it, orchestrated the whole thing, but it all came together in a very organic way and almost like with very soft boundaries leaning on one another, and one author actually asking another one, like Kevin J. Anderson talks about this in some interviews, like, hey, are you going to do something with this character or with the Jedi twins? I'm going to put them here in this kind of situation. It was such of a interesting interplay between authors creating this story. And then during later years, during the end of the Expanded Universe, 2012, 13, and 14, even that compounded so much storytelling that in between, yes, you still had plenty of room, it could be argued, to write new stories, but now you started putting yourself in the corner where that's it, it's done. This is the story, and you can't veer off too much with this character, with that, unless he did something entirely different, like the original, Tales of the Jedi, which is like 5,000 years ago, or the Dawn of the Jedi, right, which is 20,000 years ago.
So put it way back.
Yeah. So I felt that, it was very, very interesting time. That's why I have a special place in my heart for early Bantam era. And, they took full advantage of that in this book. But Meg, do you have any other examples where you saw cross references of different media in the expanded universe books, where like maybe a game character intertwined with a comic and vice versa, that was interesting to you?
I mean, one of my favorite ones for just bringing things in is AC Crispin's Han Solo trilogy, where like not only is she bringing like the Brian Daly and the Lando Calrissian adventures in, but she is like putting references to all. I could just imagine her writing those and being like, ooh, and then if I put this person, like she brings people from the comics in. It's just fun. I like in like the post New Jedi Order books, how we see like Kyle Katarn and Jaden Korran stuff show up, which I believe like we don't really see in New Jedi Order because they were working on one of the games, and so they didn't know if Kyle was dead or not at that point. But then like once it was like, okay, he's alive, then it's like, yeah. And then the great Jedi Master Kyle Katarn, and I'm like, oh, it's Kyle.
Yeah. Some of my personal favorites were, and it's one of my favorite EU books, was the Tatooine Ghost, the 2003 book by Troy Denning. And there, I come from a generation who saw Star Wars in the 80s, and that was all of my Star Wars from episode 4 to episode 6. And I had a very particular idea of who Anakin Skywalker was and who Luke's and Leia's unnamed mother was. And for me, those memories are sacred. That world that I was able to build by myself never seemed to be reflected in the prequels.
Yeah.
The vast majority of had to do of how the story was put together, not necessarily what the story was. Who am I to agree or disagree with what George Lucas is doing with his own story? But I felt that it never really seamlessly continued that mystery of who the parents really were. And Leia confronting the ghost of Darth Vader, whom we now know as Anakin from the prequels, it was such an interesting interplay. I was like, oh my God, this is like two generations of Star Wars characters coming together in one scene, and the author intimately understands both so well that I thought it was really effective. And another one I have is, because I'm such a huge video game nerd, in Star Wars Rogue Squadron games, you hear the voice of Wedge Antilles, and then how he's like Luke's right hand, and eventually he takes over. He's the leader of the Rogue Squadron. I'm like, yeah, Wedge Antilles. It's so dope. I really enjoyed when they were doing that. Moving on. So at night, the group is actually attacked, and Danny Key is captured by rogue Pharaohs. Jason and Sabatine follow and allow themselves actually to be captured to see their leader. When the departed Pharaoh band are trapped by Borer's trees, Jason saves them by calming down the trees. I guess there's some sort of sentient trees. I don't really remember. Maybe you'll refresh my memory here. And Luke communes with the planet and asks it to release the Yuuzhan Vong battle group so the planet doesn't succumb to the dark side. Ooh, that's interesting. I'm going to have a question in regards to that for sure. Now, the planet connects to Jason in Luke's mind, appearing as Luke's father and Jason's former master Vergir. And she asks if the Jedi truly wish it to join the war. Now, the Jason's answer is no, fearing for the complete annihilation of the Yuuzhan Vong species. Luke's answer is yes, for the sake of all the galaxy and all its innocent lives that need to be saved. The planet radius itself for a hyperspace jump back to the unknown regions of space because it actually sides with Luke's decision. Now, there's a lot of interesting things going on here. And talking conscious planets, strong in the Force, quite a novel idea, or is it pulp era cheese royale. Like, what exactly is this? How are we to interpret it?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely like, oh boy. Because I think the idea of like a planet having sentience is interesting. There are a few elements of Zonama Seacoast that make me sort of like the Pharaohs have built these giant hyperspace engines and attached them to the planet so they can just rocket around at will. And
Mhm.
you're like, that's where my science brain starts to go like, how, how?
What the Force?
Yeah, like how, uh,
Yeah.
you're at me, but so I guess like the concept of I'm like so interesting, but then some of the details I start to be like, don't think about too much, don't think about too much, just go with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there were definitely moments like that in the new Jedi Order series and expanded universe. I know a lot of people how they feel about Planet of Twilight and the Yavitha. I personally love it. I know how a lot of people react. I suspect if I was a lot older reading Rogue Planet and this particular book, I would have been like, bro,
Yeah.
talking planets, like for real, who's coming up with this stuff?
Yeah.
But when I was reading it, I was obviously a lot younger and I was still kind of like learning English. I honestly took it all in stride and I thought it was, oh, that's basically literal adaptation of Greek mythology. Planet,
Yeah.
Gaia, the birth giver. It's personifying and romanticizing a planet. Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. Okay, that's cool. A little
Okay.
bit, sprinkle a little bit of cheese there, like cheddar, shredded cheddar. Like that's pulpy era in its finest. There's nothing wrong with cheese as long as it's used properly and it makes it
Yeah.
interesting and it makes it. If something amidst of a powerful story gives you makes your eyes roll, like, huh? What is this? I think it's a good attribute. It only
Yeah.
helps the book be more memorable. Despite Vergiri's tampering with Jason's mind and his outlook on good versus evil, his actions speak of a seasoned Jedi, not a rash boy in this particular book. Did you feel at any point that he would actually lash out in anger and kill the Pharaoh rogues or not?
No, I don't think so. Because I think like Jason, if Jason through the new Jedi Order has been struggling, like, should I react? Should I just stand here? How do I decide? I feel like he's come to a good balance now, but it's still like I feel like he still has that essentially pacifistic nature
Mm-hmm.
where he's gonna do what he needs to do, but also he's gonna choose like the side of peace and uh, so yeah, I guess I never if anyone, I worry about Jaina lashing out at people, but
Yeah.
Jason, no,
He's a space
I don't.
hippie at this point.
He
Yeah.
is, and you know what? Good for him.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly because it's been so long reading it, but at a certain point, and it's fortunately the legacy era has not been spoiled for me because I
Mhm.
was in the process of reading it as the books were coming out. But even at that, somewhere along the lines of the second half of New Jedi Order, I had this inescapable feeling that something inside Jason is broken.
Mm,
This is all a facade. This is like he's putting up a front. And yes, I agree with you that partially he's still this pacifist, naive kid. But something there is like, I almost felt like, Jekyll is going to emerge from Dr. Hyde, Hyde is going to
mm,
emerge from Dr. Jekyll, and something terrible is about to happen, like at any given point. So I was kind of
yeah.
worried for Jason. But how is the answer the planet gave different from Jason to Luke? How did you find the difference between their?
I feel like I understand why Jason was like, no, don't want death, this. And then you understand Luke's answer, which is like, you can save the galaxy. And I feel like getting those two very different responses, it's almost like Zonama Seacoat's like, okay, thanks
Mhm.
for your opinions. I've made my mind up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not that as if it was influenced by them, but it kind of
Mhm.
want them to like, is this what be careful what you wish for? But
Yeah.
is this Luke's version of The Last Jedi, I was like, oh, my nephew's gonna turn evil. I'm gonna slash the crap out of him. Or was it more of a measured, seasoned warrior decisions like, hey, the galaxy is not just black and white. This is what needs to be happen. Destroy the crap out of Yuuzhan Vong.
Yeah, I felt like it was the latter because I feel to a certain extent Luke in the New Jedi Order has been reluctant, especially in the first half, reluctant to take action, sort of like what should be the Jedi's role in this? How should we respond?
Yeah.
But I feel like they've gone through so much, they've seen so much that he's like, look, that we have to do this. Like, this isn't a emotional reaction. This is based on so much observation and fact that like this is the only approach we can take.
And experience, yeah. Versus Jason, who is like this idealist, youth, who, even amidst this war, I mean, he's been through quite a lot already, let's agree. But still, he's like this maximalist. No, stop it. At the end, everything is gonna be fine. It's like, and Luke is like, dude, kid, just hold on a second. Let's sort this out. Let's win this war first, and then we get to decide what to do with our, defeated enemy. Okay, we're approaching the finale of this book. On the terraformed Coruscant, now called Yuuzhan Tar, another of Nomenor's schemes is unraveled. Supreme Leader Shimra discovers that the priestess Ngalu is a traitor in his group. And he basically horrified Nomenor witnesses as his cohort slits her own throat before her execution, and her body is dumped along with the rivals. And the infiltrators' best chance of overthrowing the Supreme Leader Shimra are done. They're over.
Yeah.
Now, Nomenor is cunning, he's intelligent, and he's definitely cautious, but we never quite saw him in a state of complete terror. Now, great story provides context of what a character is thinking, but leaves room for readers' interpretation. And my question is, what is Nomenor thinking in this particular scene as he sees his last hope literally doing this to herself?
I feel like Nomenor was almost getting a little cocky in the Force Heretic trilogy, where he's like, okay, I'm on the outs with Shimra, but I got a plan. I'm building my own army. And I think there was also in the back of his mind that whole thing of like, maybe I can get back in Shimra's good graces if I turn them all in. And I think knowing like, oh, like this,
if I play my cards right.
Yeah, he's like, I play my cards right. My cards are on fire. And it's like, so it's like, he does not know where to go from here.
Yeah.
I mean, he will go, but it's definitely a huge step back for him. And like, oh, my great scheme is falling apart.
And I think also what the story wanted to convey through him, through this character, is that, as I mentioned before, we knew that he's cunning. We knew that he is all for himself. But here, in this particular scene, we see that not for the first time, but clearly now, the Yuuzhan Vong realize their mortality. They're like, crap. Through him, not through the leader, not through the military, but through this one guy who operates within the layers of power, and he affects things, and shifts, powers in this way or that way to benefit himself. But now even him, he's like, this is it. We've reached the end line. It's like during the last 4 months of war, there's a wonderful Russian film who actually used a lot of German actors post-war. It was shot in the 70s, where they showed the last 4 months of war. And this basically Russian spy who is part of the SS. And he's talking to one of the higher-ups, and the higher-ups is in his office, and they don't know if they're being monitored or not, if they're being recorded. And this guy basically tells them, that's it. It's done. And the Russian spy to play his role is like, do you actually realize what you're saying? The great leader, Hitler, he will lead us through this. Like, no, I'm tired of pretending. It's over. He's incapable of making military decisions anymore. We're done for. the future of the Nazi party will be left with the future, blah, blah. He gives this whole spiel how in the future they might overcome and resurface again. But for the time being, we're done, dude. We're over. And this is what we see in this particular scene through Nomenor. Now, if his plans came to fruition indeed, and the Supreme Overlord was deposed, how would the new Jedi Von Society look like, and what would Nomenor's role be in it, in your view?
Yeah, because that's the thing, because obviously the shamed ones want equality, and that's why they're going along with the Jedi heresy. But that's not what Nomenor wants. Nomenor, I feel like, doesn't believe in anything of the Yuuzhan Vong, but he does believe in his own superiority. So if they had overthrown Shimra, I don't see it turning out well for the people that he's been, you know, the prophet for all along. Like, they're true believers, but Nomenor is not. And
would he maintain power for a long time, do you think?
I don't know, though, because I feel like what he does so well is like behind the scenes. And I think if he was like, all right, you're the boss now, it would almost be like, shoot.
What's
I
next?
don't want this. Yeah.
You're basically reiterating the same points that I had. Like, certain of my opinions, like I tried to jog down because I know I'm going to forget. And I wrote here that I think that the severed body would basically not last long without its head being cut off.
Yeah.
And Nomenor, like you mentioned, he's a strategist. He's not a leader. He can't set an example. He's like, I know the pathway. He's always like this slithering worm, like, oh, this hole is closed, sealed off to me. I'm going to go this route. I'm going to do something different. That's his strength, knowing and finding the weak shadow points and points of interest and opportunity. I think that he would aspire to assume control.
Yeah.
Because he's full of himself. He's probably even he's like one of his disguises, not Philip, how do you call it, the body armor,
the cloakers,
cloakers, exactly, and try to like maybe act as a Shimra, but somebody would soon probably like call him out on his BS and say like, wait a second, what? That's not how a leader acts. We know our own technology. What's going on here? Oh, I was like, oh my God, okay. And everybody was like panicking, running around with their heads on fire again, and they would again lose this war. So I don't think he would have had any major effect on it. Over the years, I've heard very different opinions on this Force Heretic trilogy. Like I mentioned earlier, one of my moderators for the group, a French, Sean, he finished this trilogy. He had a lot to say. And he's very up and down on the new Jedi Order books based on what he's reading. He's reading it for the first time, and arguably so. Even back in the day when the new Jedi Order was coming out, not everybody was on board with every single book. Like, yes. But we had like a range of opinions. People like bickering and forth. No, like, how could it do this to Chewie, that character? So it was a very diverse. Now, I've heard some praise for the heavily layered plot structure. You know, others criticize oversaturation of plot twists and supporting cast. They didn't have their character arcs resolved by the end of this trilogy. Yeah. What do you like and dislike about the Force Heretic overall?
Yeah. What I like Tahiri's plot. I felt like that was very gripping to read. I felt like the Leia, Han, Jaina plot felt a little meandering. Especially in book 2, where you're like, all right, what's the point of this? Like, is this really... And I sort of have some similar feelings about the Luke, Mara, Jason plot, where it's like them getting the Imperial remnant back on their side. Great. But then do we really need a whole book, which is them looking for Zonama Seacoat in a Chiss library? And then you come to Reunion, and I think it's really interesting them on Zonama Seacoat and speaking with the planet. But I guess my final opinion is this is the only trilogy in the new Jedi Order series, and I don't think we needed 3 books.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to ask him again, but from what I remember with interacting with Sean, I think he said something along the same lines. He's generally of an opinion when he gives his critique,
Mhm.
He likes things more condensed. I personally also, I like stories that are far more condensed. I'm not generally a fan of plot twist upon plot twist. When we
Yeah.
were kids, like back in Russia, when we watched movies, nobody cared if you spoiled the ending for someone.
Mm.
We wanted to see how it all plays out on screen. Like, oh, did you see Terminator when this guy kills that guy? Like, I have a tape at home. Like, really? Can I go see it? Like, nobody was even pointing out that you're spoiling it for me. It was not part of our vocabulary. Like, oh, spoilers. I didn't know what it was. But, and I think the reason I'm saying that is that it's a lot tougher and it demands a lot more talent and skill to tell a linear story from the beginning and the end, where the events are pretty much foreseeable. Yeah, I can obviously one or two impactful plot twists or diverging the story in an unexpected way. It works for the story. But when you start doing, oh, but he's really a replica, and but the Shiruka are not really, like, bro, like, can we stop with this? Yeah, it was overbearing a little bit. You know, that to me was the only flaw. But as somebody who reads science fiction with English being their second language, I'm going to speak for myself. You instinctively attach to characters first, because it's quite different to understand scene description when you don't have a large vocabulary, and it's even harder to figure out what's happens during action scenes, especially during dogfights. Even to this day, I have difficulty. Like, wait a second, what is the exact maneuver they're trying to describe? That's hard. So obviously, it kind of diminishes your interest there, but people you can relate to. And all the cast in the Heretic trilogy, to me, was just dope. I liked all the supporting cast. I loved all the little priests and priestesses and how the Nomenor exploits them, because to me, it kind of like built the world of Star Wars in general. It showed you that there's not these chiseled out visible figures who are there just necessarily to fix the story, what it's going to be. But there's smaller characters, you know, pawns on the chessboard, who kind of show you how things work here, and just gives you that believability, that suspense of belief. And I'm like, oh, the suspense of disbelief. Sorry, guys. And he's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I see what's going on there. And the last question is, what do you think is this trilogy's impact on the overall new Jedi Order series? What is its biggest accomplishment?
I think for me, the Nominor plot line, like developing that Jedi heresy, and I think the Tahiri developments, because it was something like, she's not doing great, but then this really like articulated exactly what's going on with her and how she's able to work through it. So I think I feel like you can skip the like Jason plot and just know, like, okay, they get to know Namasi Code in the end, and so Namasi Code joins their side. Sort of similar with the Solo plots, where you're like, they visit other worlds and then they get this communications hub up and running. But like Nominor and the Jedi heresy and Tahiri's transformation and understanding herself, like, you need to know those going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, you know, who's a sucker for Royale with cheese, it was nice to see a fruition of where Luke's sort of, there's not a lot of Force philosophy going on there, but the fact that he makes a landing on Zenoma Secor and how he interacts with this entity, you know, it brought something interesting from the past that I read, I really enjoyed, but it also showed me how Luke's growth of understanding of the Force is there, and that mini culmination of the planet, almost like a character arc conclusion for the planet, really landed for me. I was like, oh, that's cool. And Jason is there, and his inexperience with the Force, how he is seeing things, and here is Luke. That was really cool. But again, to bring it home, I think the highlight for me is obviously Tahiri Vela. I really loved that character. I really loved how she came through this ordeal, and she became almost like this new person. And I always sympathized with female characters. Like I mentioned it times before, when I make my RPGs, all my characters are female. I don't know why. That's something I enjoy. Like my younger bro, all my friends poke fun of it. That's what I enjoy doing. Maybe it's my old school Soviet upbringing of traditional values where, guy is supposed to be the shoulder and not offend or hurt girls, but protect them. That chivalrous kind of behavior, maybe in some capacity today, is frowned upon. But being able to put that aside and say, first of all, everybody needs help. Everybody, regardless what your gender is, what generation you come from, we all need a shoulder to lean on. We all need a helping hand. And in this case, it's Tahiri being helped by her friend, Jaina, and you see that she is able to overcome. She's able to come with gripes, and she's just so inspiring and so full of life and believability. And I challenge any modern Star Wars fan to say that the expanded universe didn't have powerful female role models. I mean, she's everything that's supposed to be. And I really love, I don't know why I'm hyperfixating on it. Maybe it's too much interaction on Twitter, but it is never emphasized what her skin color is. It is never emphasized who she likes to bed. That's not the point. The point is, this is the hardship of life, the reality of life, smacking you like cold water style in the face, and you're able to cope with it and show a strength of character and discipline and come on top of it and say, yes, I am powerful, I am strong, and I don't need this or stack myself up against Jagged Fell or Jason Solo to have validity and equal representation in the Star Wars book. Meg, any last words? I'm happy we're finally back on track. I'm going to try to do a little bit more systemic scheduling. Let's finish up the new Jedi Order books. Have you read the Legacy? I forgot. Have you finished the Legacy books?
I did. I finished them last year, which was actually the first time I did finish them because the original go around I gave up halfway through.
OMG. That's I loved New Jedi Order, but Legacy, if Benjamin was ever on the verge of tears, and not because of one plot point, but because of overall thing, Legacy is it. That's my spirit animal is Legacy. I would love to discuss that with you. Maggie, any last words? Please tell all the fans where they can find your stuff, and we'll resume very soon with our next podcast.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube as Meg Reviews. I have been rereading the Republic Commando books and now jumping into Darth Bane. And I'm on Goodreads as well. I don't remember my username there, but yeah.
All the links will be in the description, guys. Once again, thanks a lot for tuning in. Forgive me specifically for half a year break. I just needed to unwind a little bit, desaturate myself from Star Wars. But we're going to be producing a lot more content. I hope, Meg, that you will come up again. I always love talking Star Wars with you. I love your insight. I love the way that we review books and talk about the Star Wars characters. And yeah, folks, if you enjoy this podcast, please feel free to support us. Like this video, go check out Meg's channel, and we'll see you guys very soon.